So this week, we went to the union buildings. We're still looking at the different manifestos from the different political parties. I went to the lawns specifically of the union buildings because that's where we found the Democratic Alliance. That's the main opposition in the country. They launched their manifesto on those lawns in the capital city. Think about it. It's obviously aspirational, right? So I thought a little bit about the optics of all that blue, seeing the statue of Tata Madiba embracing the blue. So I understood what they were doing. When it comes to messaging, media messaging, the DA does a really clever gimmick. And that's exactly what we saw in Pretoria. They're not going to participate in Stadium 1 That's an ANC EFF thing. And I don't think the DA has enough of a crowd that will actually venture out to an FNB stadium to fill up FNB. So that's not their tactic. But I do think that they did something smart to get us talking about them. But what was interesting for me is one, driving to the union buildings. Tshwane is dirty. I don't understand why they made us drive through rubbish littered streets to get to the union buildings. What was interesting for me though is that Tshwane didn't get the mention that one would have imagined. It is, of course, a city that is run by the DA. So where we govern better, we govern well, whatever way you govern, one would have imagined that's part of the conversation. Yes, I know they'll make an argument about how it's a DA-led coalition. Okusalayo, the DA is in charge of that city, right? So I said, Tshwane is dirty. Please note, so is Johannesburg, so is Ekurhuleni. That's a whole different conversation on coalitions that I'm not having today. But for today, I'll speak about this booklet, the DA's manifesto. This is the rescue plan for South Africa. That's what they're proposing to the electorate ahead of the elections. I read it. It's not as thick as what we had from the EFF. It's obviously a lot bigger than the other parties that we've reviewed so far. But it's an interesting read. I think there's one or two things I really like. But I want to get into a little bit of what's contained in this particular manifesto. Lots of pictures, like the others. I think for me, what stood out is one, I spoke about the venue. I do think it's aspirational. Listening to their leader, John Steenhuisen, at the weekend speak about how they're not campaigning to be in opposition. They're campaigning to now defeat the ANC. But to then go on and speak about the multi-party charter, what does it tell you? But the DA knows that it cannot do it alone, that it needs help to get to the union buildings, that it's all good and well to have aspirations for high office, the capital. The DA recognizes that it's reached some limitation in growing the party. Pay attention. The other thing that I found interesting was Eskom, right? So they want to bring an end to load shedding and water shedding. Water is a different thing altogether for a different reason. I'll explain it just now. They want to bring an end to load shedding. What's interesting for me is that they speak about the Western Cape as a model of the way forward, but actually, first look at what they're proposing around Eskom and recognize or realize it's not necessarily different from what you have with the NC government. Unbundling, government has done that. The IPPs, we know about that conversation. The issue of an energy mix, that's what this current government speaks of. Even the idea of different provinces being able to procure their own energy. Gwede Mantashe in 2020 signed off on an amendment that municipalities should do so. So there, I don't find a lot that's different from the way that we're tackling the issue of electricity. Generators, again, we've been having it. So I'm not sure about the Eskom proposal. I think the answer would lie in how quickly they'll do it, right? The EFF says that they would stop load shedding in 6 months. I'd say unrealistic. I'm struggling to find more out of the plan that the DA has put forward. And they keep saying it's commitments. No, I'm struggling to believe the promise that they make around load shedding. With water shedding, what's interesting for me is, again, Western Cape and Cape Town are the examples of what's the best thing to do. But I don't know if you realize that very recently, Cape Town's water wasn't fit for drinking. It was below the national average. So I battled to read a message from a party that has those kind of inconsistencies. Speaking of which, policing. I think it's realistic to say the target should be halving it, at least violent crimes, they say. The problem with that, the Western Cape is possibly the most dangerous province in the country, right? So there are issues where, like, so you're not looking at yourselves and what your shortcomings are and what you're offering. And I think there's a little bit of a problem there, but ultimately they've got 7 priorities that they're offering. I think I do need to speak about their approach to triple BEE and affirmative action. While they point out that it doesn't work, that's their overall thing, is that it doesn't work. My argument as a black woman who's speaking to you on this platform would be that transformation agenda is important, and to some degree it does matter and it does work. Otherwise, I would not be here if there was not a concerted effort, right, to get companies to embrace the rest of us, to get companies to right the wrongs of the past, through making sure that people like me with merit find their ways to spaces like this. I think the DA continues to struggle to navigate that. They believe through this manifesto that they've answered that question, that they've got a clear view on what to do. They want to rely on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not sure if the SDGs are accurate. They want to reward companies, right, that hire people based on the SDGs. Again, you are now putting morality in the hands of corporates. Monopoly capital. They want to put their trust, as far as ethics are concerned, in the hands of corporate, which the world over for decades has been involved in wrongdoing. So I'm not sure about their approach. They think they filmed it. I think they still need to go back to the drawing board. I think you cannot serve a nation if you don't recognize what makes up that nation. And our history, apartheid, the lack of transformation, because it's still an issue, are part and parcel of that. I don't deny that there's an issue with the way the ANC deals with triple BEE, but I don't think that their answer is what the DA is proposing. It's also very interesting if you look at what they say about the funding model, NSFAS, right? So ANC president of the country is lambasted because he says if you don't vote for the ANC, you lose things like social grants and NSFAS. They have an approach to NSFAS, different model of NSFAS that might include some of you paying back for NSFAS. That's not currently what's on the table. So there is a need to interrogate this manifesto and what it is that the DA is saying. There's a need to go to your representatives and ask for greater clarity. What I do like, though, is the approach. It's one of their priorities, the issue around learners, and that they want grade 4 learners to be able to read for meaning. I think that's important. I think if South Africa is to turn around its trajectory, something has to be done about education, particularly with the much younger generations. So I think that that's important. I think you can go read the manifestos. I've been encouraging you to read all these manifestos. They're available online. I think if you're trying to vote, which I think you should, you must read on what's on offer from the different parties, so you know what you're buying into when you go cast your vote. And I also think we must speak a little bit for 2 seconds about John Steenhuisen. The fact that we're continuously being asked, what do you think of John Steenhuisen? I think that's the indictment on the leader of the day. The fact that we still have to be asked whether he's fit to lead the DA into these elections, which are a few months away, is an indictment on the person who is playing the role of federal leader. That is still compared to his predecessor, again, is one of those issues. The fact that we have to be told by the party that the party carries the message, no, that's not true. The leader of any party, that's where the responsibility lies. They shoulder how people understand the party and how it performs. And I think the fact that those conversations are still happening around John Steenhuisen is a problem. I did watch him on Saturday, and I think, he really tried his best to come off as a confident, fully in charge leader. Yes, there's that weird thing, are you doubling a traditional healer? In Younger the place, in Younger the month, are you doubling? Apparently it's the moon. I'm not sure about the moonshot pact. So yeah, it's very confusing. I think he was trying to be relatable, but that has now overshadowed the manifesto and the contents of their rescue plan for the country. But do read before you go vote, so you make an informed decision in terms of what works for you. I'll bring you more of these manifestos in the coming weeks.